Governor John Kasich just moments ago suspending, of course, the race for the primary. All right, with me now, former presidential candidate, former Minnesota Governor John Pawlenty. Governor, welcome back. Glad you are here. Are you surprised that Governor Kasich dropped out, notwithstanding the number of delegates that he had accrued?
No, I'm not surprised at all, Deidre. He needed to come to grips with the reality that this wasn't his year and he wasn't going to be the nominee, and I think just continuing on would have served no real purpose. Okay,
now we know that Donald Trump, the presumptive nominee, has put Dr. Ben Carson in charge of his VP selection committee. Here's Trump's comments on at least the type of person he's looking for. Actually, we don't have that sound, but I can tell you that he alluded to earlier this idea of maybe choosing somebody with military experience, and then in general he just gave comments about looking for somebody with obvious integrity. Has he reached out to you?
No, he has not, but I've heard him speak about this at some length, and most recently he said, look, I need somebody who's got some experience in the legislative process so I can get things passed. I think that's a wise insight. A bonus would be obviously somebody with military background. I think he needs to bring in somebody who's more adept and has a deeper subject matter mastery on policy. And there's a lot of good options like you've been discussing on this show. But then I would also add, if you can get all of that and have somebody bring a political piece to the puzzle to the table, like a state or a piece of political demography that will help in the election, that would be the right kind of person to put on the ticket.
So, Governor, let me ask you, can the party come together? I mean, Trump so far has run a very impressive campaign on a very little amount of money, but there are still people who say, I can't get behind him. Will that change?
Well, keep in mind, in 2008, when Barack Obama won the Democratic nomination, there was somewhere around 40% of that party who was not supporting him, who said they could never support him. And what people say in April and May certainly is genuine and reflective of how they feel, but history shows it's often very different in October. And so he's not going to get everybody, but if he gets somewhere around 90% or plus, that's basically the party intact. You always have some outliers. Then the real challenge for him is going to be, can he go get some independents and some Democrats and actually win this election, especially in those 6 to 10 states that are going to swing.
So I'm glad you mentioned that, because we did see evidence of that happening. I'm just remembering Massachusetts. There were 20,000 voters who purposefully switched their party. They went from being Democrats to being Republicans to be able to vote for Donald Trump. So if there are more of those, then it's going to be an interesting November.
Yeah, and they're probably, if he loses some Republicans, but even if he had all of the Republicans in most of these swing states, that's not enough to do it. You've got to get some independents and you've got to get some new supporters. And it's particularly important in those 6 or 8 that make up the election. And those swing voters tend to be suburban women, blue-collar men, increasingly Hispanic and Latinos, and a few other groups. So he's got to think about how does his message align with what they're looking for.
Governor, thank you very much for your thoughts. Glad to have them.
You're welcome.